Hi there, Dave Hunt here, owner of GameMasters Guild, and today I'm going to do a little retro review on basic Dungeons & Dragons. And back in the early to mid 80s, this is the Dungeons & Dragons that me and my friends would play. And these box sets, well, we could pick them up used anywhere from $5 to $10, depending on what store you were at and depending on the condition of the box set. Now, usually, when they were brand new, they'd have a player's manual, a Dungeon Master's rulebook, a set of dice, and a crayon to where you could color the numbers. Because at that time, in the box set, the numbers were not inked, so you'd have to use a crayon to ink them. And at one point in time, fun fact, they used to even sell the dice like that, uninked, with a black or white crayon, so you could go in there and ink the dice yourself. And also, it even had instructions on the back about how to mark your Dragon Dice random number generators, and also how to read your Dragon Dice random number generators, specifically the D4, which I thought was pretty interesting, because now you get dice, it's just assumed you know what they are, and it's just assumed you know how to read them. But I thought this was kind of interesting. And in a nice little blister pack where each die kind of had its own spot, and it came with the crayon to mark it. So anyways, you'd pick these up used. Usually you wouldn't have the dice, you'd only have the two books, the Dungeon Master's rulebook and the player's manual. The player's manual, 63 pages, and like any good starter set, has everything you need in order to play the game. And it's, of course, still D&D Basic. It's pretty rules light. So what's really nice, though, about it is it does get you involved in the game right away. There's a little solo mission that gets you into the feel and the mood of how the game should be and how it should run. And then after that, of course, it jumps straight into character creation, which it has a lot of things that you'll remember, like strength, intelligence, wisdom, dexterity, con, charisma, the usual attributes. And still, there were 7 classes that you could actually be in Dungeons & Dragons Basic, which, well, 7 classes, that's not too bad. You had the fighter, cleric, thief, and magic user. Now, these classes, pretty standard, and you even know them today. If you played Dungeons & Dragons once, twice, or a million times, pretty standard, right? Well, these definitely aren't the classes that you remember. First of all, no feats. If you use magic on any level, no cantrips. At this point in time, there were no cantrips whatsoever. So that was pretty much it. As a magic user, you didn't get to choose, like, well, I'm going to study mostly transmutation or mostly divination or evocation, like in 5th edition, where you get to a certain level and you get to choose, like, evocation, and you get bonuses because of it. Nope, that's it. So for a wizard, if you made up a magic user, you got 2 spell slots and you're adventuring, boo boo, you shoot them both off and you're done. That's it. Now you're just a watered down fighter who can only wield pretty much a knife and a stick. So definitely, you were definitely a lot more vulnerable, I feel. Also too, and I know a lot of people did this differently, although we actually rolled up our hit points as the rules suggested. You roll and that's what you got. There wasn't, at first level, you didn't get your max hit points, and then adjust it with Constitution modifier. No, you just rolled, and then you took the Constitution modifier. So I remember running around having a wizard with like 1 hit point. That's a pretty hard game to play when you're a wizard with 1 hit point, and you could just get incidentally stabbed by a bandit, as a little random encounter, and you'd be like, I'm dead. Pretty rough. And we had some rough games like that, and it was pretty fun. So those are the first 4 classes. Now the other 3 classes are interesting. They're dwarf, elf, and halfling. Now you'll recognize these as actual races. Well, if I pick dwarf, elf, or halfling, Dave, what do I do with them? What can I be any of the other classes? No, that is your class. So you're either a human fighter, human cleric, human thief, human magic user, or you were just a dwarf, an elf, or halfling. Now dwarfs and elves had cool infravision, like they still do today. Now also too, the dwarf, they could also detect traps, sliding walls, sloping corridors, new constructions, and elves also could find secret and hidden doors better than most other characters. Halflings, they had a bonus to AC depending on how big the target was, and also too they had a bonus to initiative, so they're kind of nimble, and that rules kind of reflected that. And unlike, let's say, 5th edition, where you got to pick common, and then you typically got, a language depending on your background and or race. You got even more languages here, like the dwarf. He also spoke gnome, goblin, kobold. Elves could speak gnoll, hobgoblin, orc. Oh yeah, elves were immune to ghoul process, just like they are today. Halflings, see, they also got to speak, halfling, and I think there was a couple others, and I can't remember exactly what else they could speak, but that's okay. I'll move on. In basic Dungeons and Dragons, you only got to go up to level 3. That's right, only 3 levels of experience. Although, depending on your primary attribute, so let's say if you're a fighter and your prerequisite is strength, and you have to have a high strength to be a fighter, if your score was high enough, you could actually get a percentage bonus to your experience points that you earned. Or if it was too low, you'd get a penalty. So that was kind of interesting too. So that was very different. We tended not to use it too much. I think at the time it was just too much hassle, like, we're not going to do that. But we did use a lot of encumbrance. And we did work pretty heavily with encumbrance. And my friend Billy at the time, he ran a lot of Dungeons and Dragons for us. And he was a master of calculating encumbrance. You just like rattle off what you had, and he'd just sit there with his head. Yep, you can carry that much or you can't. Going back to a couple of the classes, clerics and magic users both had spells that had an asterisk next to them that were listed as reversible. So, in a sense, without printing a whole nother spell, you could just basically take one spell and reverse it and get the same effect. Like cure wounds, you reverse it, and now it's inflict wounds. And however, nowadays, they're 2 totally different spells. And another thing, of course, back then, there were no critical hits or there were no critical hits, like critical successes or critical fails. You know, it just, you rolled the 1, hey, you rolled the 1. You rolled the 20, hey, great. But if your hit roll still wasn't high enough to get past someone's armor class, well, natural 20 just doesn't matter. Now, back then, you also had something called THAC0, which was 2-hit armor class 0. So a level 1 character who was going up against someone who had a 0 armor class would have to roll a 19. If that enemy had a -1 armor class, you'd have to roll a 20. And on the back of a character sheet of the player's manual, it actually has a spot on the bottom where it shows the chart for you to hit the armor class, or your THAC0 essentially. So that's what THAC0 was, 2-hit armor class 0. It was a lot different. Instead of just saying, hey, you got to get a 17 or better to hit this guy, instead they would call it, if you wore the right armor and had the right dex, I guess, you'd have an AC of 2, which means you had to get a 17 or higher, instead of just saying, hey, this guy's got armor class 17, you got to roll 17 or better. So that was definitely different. And I know THAC0 really messed people up, and even nowadays, if you mention, hey, you know what THAC0 is? A lot of people don't know because they haven't used that since 2nd edition, and that was quite a while ago. Something else they had in the player's manual, of course, they had had about half a dozen pre-made characters, which was nice. They had a blank sheet of graph paper for copies. On the back, of course, you had the character sheet that you just photocopy for your own use. They also had only 3 basic alignments, which was law or lawful, chaos or chaotic, and neutrality or neutral. They only had the 3 main ones. They hadn't diverted out and had a lot of the different ones like chaotic, neutral, and everything like that. Now, the Dungeon Masters rulebook, as soon as you open it, on the inside cover, you've got a key for making your own maps or interpreting theirs. And it had all the different marks for secret doors, trap doors, caverns, all that stuff. So if you want to sit there with some graph paper and make out your own, you already knew what kind of symbols to put down. And if your players knew those symbols as well, which you definitely want to share with them, that key, you could make maps that you're blue in the face, throw it out there, and they know, oh, that's a regular door. Oh, we found a secret door. Let's mark that on the map. Oh, is that a statue? Great. And so it was nice that they had that, and it covered the whole inside cover. So it was really nice. You could really see it nice and easy, and it was easy enough to add it to your own maps. Now, it does talk about, of course, the DM's role, as any good Dungeon Master's guide would do. The Dungeon Master's rulebook goes right into your first adventure that you run for the players, and it's a short dungeon crawl. And on level 1, everything's pre-planned out for you with all the monsters and everything. The second level, they have the map and they have a list of monsters, but it's up to you to kind of put them where you want to. And the third level is completely up to you. However, they definitely give you some suggestions as to what monsters and villains you should put in what location, maybe kind of what should happen, just a general idea. Now there are several pages of procedures and rules for the Dungeon Master, like alignment changes, resolving arguments and complaints, giving out clues, character creation, deities, dice, doors, evasion, pursuit, higher level spells, languages, listening, mapping, morale, retainers, playing multiple characters, how to handle new rules, or rules that, or things that the rules don't cover, what to do about that, or how to make up items or new items or monsters. So it gives you a lot of information, and surprisingly, in only a book that's 48 pages, there's a lot of information. They got down right to brass tacks and really gave you exactly what you needed. There's even a pretty well detailed monster section of various strengths and various kinds of monsters, and there's over 90 different monsters, and I was pretty impressed that there was that much variety in the Dungeon Master's Guide. I went back and counted. I counted 2 or 3 times just to make sure I was right. It's probably like 95, 96, but I just say 90 plus. Now, admittedly, that's counting the different kinds of dragons there are. So I didn't count dragon once. I counted dragon, 5 or 6 times, however many dragons were in there, or the different kinds of snakes, or the different kind, or like a bat, giant bat. I counted that. Each one of those entries is 1. So. But still, there's a lot of different varieties in there. And I still think that's pretty impressive, especially for back then. Comes complete with a bunch of treasure tables and over 35 different magic items. And they really gave you a lot of stuff in here. There's also a small section on dungeon creation, and of course several reference charts for the DM. And I gotta tell you, I think for being a starter set with only 111 pages between 2 books, wow, I think they really had a lot in here. They really had a lot of information, and I was pretty impressed. And it really captured our imagination when we were kids, and it still continues to do so now. And of course, there's something about making up, a character where your class is your race. I'm a dwarf. Which class? That's what it is. I'm a dwarf. That's what I do. I do dwarf stuff. I do elf stuff. I do halfling stuff. It's pretty interesting, and it's kind of interesting that they couldn't participate as a fighter, cleric, thief, or magic user, but also at the same time, they had, like the elf did have the ability to cast spells, and the other races, dwarf and halfling, did have things to kind of help compensate for the fact that they weren't those classes. Oh, and also something else back then too, it was pretty restrictive about weapons, whereas nowadays in 5th edition, if you're not proficient in a weapon, you can still use it, you just don't get your bonus. Back then, it was like, if you're a wizard, I think staff and dagger is the only thing you could use. If you weren't trained in it, you were like, I'm just an idiot. I don't know what to do with a sword. A dagger I can deal with all day, or a staff I can deal with all day, but a sword, nope. And inevitably, it would come up sooner or later. Every now and then someone's like, are you sure I just can't pick up a long sword and stab the guy? And our DM would be like, no, you can't because you're not trained in it. And we're like, why? And, when you're a wizard, hey, you're studying the mystic arts, you really don't deal with this kind of stuff. Why would you when you have magic available to you? And the arguments always sounded pretty legit. But it is nice that nowadays, thank God, my wizard can actually pick up a sword and swing on somebody instead of being like, well, a sword is sitting there, could save my life. Well, I guess I can't touch it. It's crazy back then. But anyways, I gotta tell you, Basic Dungeons & Dragons, pretty cool stuff. And then, of course, it wasn't just this box set either. They had other box sets, too, that they come out with. They had the Expert Rules, they had the Player's Companion, they had the Immortals box set, and I'm probably missing a box set somewhere in there as well. I think I've got almost all of them nowadays. I had a bunch of that stuff, and then over the years, I think got lost, or I gave stuff away, and then, of course, going back, what did I have to do? Well, man, I had to go pick it up some more. Or I had to go pick up additional copies, because who knows what I did with some of it. Something else, too, that I don't want to end this video without mentioning, and that is the amazing art of Larry Elmore. And actually, that's on the front cover, and even throughout the book, there's a lot of Larry Elmore's art in both books, but also, too, Jeff Easley is another artist, and his art can be seen all throughout the books as well. And what I do like is both the artistic styles seem to complement each other very nicely. It seems like they're, whether or not it's true, but it seemed like they almost kind of coordinated their efforts to actually make it look cohesive and feel like the same world. But there's a lot of times in some books that I'll pick up, and you can see there's two really different art styles, and or maybe even more. And sometimes this doesn't bother me so much, but sometimes it kind of breaks my mood, especially if one art is more cartoony than the other art, or one art it's just really far apart from the other art. I'm not sure quite how to explain it, but sometimes it just doesn't feel right. You know, I'll be flipping through, and for me personally, like Palladium's Dead Rain books, and I'm not trying to diss on them or nothing like that, because I do like the Palladium system, but some of their later books, especially in Dead Rain, some of the art is really good, and some of the other art, it looks cool, but it just doesn't set right with me. I don't know, I just don't like some of the art styles. But hey, that's okay, there's nothing wrong with that. I still really enjoy the books and their systems. But again, that's not what this video is about. But that art by Larry Elmore and Jeff Easley, great stuff. And I had a chance to meet Larry Elmore many years ago at MobyCon. Super nice guy, super nice guy. I took my D&D Red Box up to him with both my books, and I had a copy of Star Frontiers with both the books inside. And I asked him how much it would be to sign the box and both boxes and both books within each box. And he said, "Oh, I'll just do it for free. I'll personalize each box," he said, "but then I'll just sign the books." I was like, "Oh, okay." And he wouldn't take any money for it at all. And I was flabbergasted. Super nice guy, reminded me of my father. And you know, I was like, oh, I was just so impressed that you know, after I took my box sets back to the table, I came back and I bought, originally I was going to buy 2 of these prints right behind me of the red box cover, and inevitably ended up buying 4. 2 for myself and 1 for each of my friends who we'd played a lot, Billy and Marty. You guys know who you are. And I just thought it was really cool. I just had to get it. And maybe that's what he was doing. He was signing stuff for free in the hopes that it would bring people back to buy his art. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter to me. He was a super nice guy, no expectations, super pleasant to talk to every time you went up to him. I mean, it was really good. And also, too, he was very particular about, like, I was picking one of the arts right here, and one of the sheets was kind of crinkled, and it was outside the art. It was just kind of like, his art was printed, and there was like a white border around it, and part of the white area was crinkled a little bit, and I said, "Oh, I don't mind." He's like, "Oh, no, that one's no good." So he was very particular about his art. If the picture was damaged in any way, even if the actual art itself wasn't damaged, but just that white border was maybe crinkled or bent, he would not sell it. And that was something else. I was pretty impressed with that. And that was many years ago. Great guy, great guy. So anyways, this is Basic Dungeons and Dragons. And if you ever get a chance to flip through one of these books or pick up one of these box sets, go for it. It's pretty cool. I even think that maybe you might even be able to get this stuff reprinted either through Wizards of the Coast or maybe Drive-Thru RPG. I know someone a few years ago got some Star Frontiers books reprinted through Drive-Thru RPG, and I think you still can, but that's something you have to check. But anyways, all in all, Basic Dungeons and Dragons, one of my favorite versions of Dungeons and Dragons. Why? I don't know. Probably because it's the first one I got into. Because typically, the first RPG you get into, even if it's like Dungeons and Dragons, there's so many different versions, you typically love the first version the best. At least I do anyways. I got real fond memories of that. So, but anyways, I hope you enjoyed my quick look at Dungeons and Dragons Basic. And in the future, I'm definitely going to be looking to do a video on Star Frontiers, which I mentioned briefly, because I really enjoyed playing that as well. And, well, I guess that's pretty much it for now. Thanks for sticking with me. Thanks for checking out my retro review of Basic Dungeons and Dragons. And I'm Dave Hunt, owner of GameMasters Guild, telling you to stay safe, play great games, and I'll see you real soon.